Hey there, I'm Miranda Cosgrove. Hi. I'm Miranda Cosgrove. Hi. I'm Miranda Cosgrove. Hi. I'm Miranda Cosgrove. Hi. I'm Miranda Cosgrove, and this is Mission Unstoppable. It's science, you know? You could fit 1.3 million Earths inside the sun. Well, not you. You're not strong enough to lift even one Earth. Get real.
Double touch. Bats, 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 bats.
Welcome back to Science and Stuff, the show where we talk about science, and we talk about stuff, and we talk about really cool things. Everything that you see on this channel is all based off of Mission Unstoppable, which is an amazing show that airs every Saturday morning on CBS, and it's hosted by our queen, Miranda Cosgrove, and it's all about all different women working in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and math. So if you have never tuned in before, you definitely should. Again, it's on every Saturday on CBS in the mornings, and there's we are currently in reruns, but we have new episodes out all the time, so definitely be on lookout for those. I promise you'll learn something new from all of them. And today we even have a very, very fun and special guest who not only was on 4 different episodes this season, or no, she was on more than that, but she had 4 different segments this season. She also was on last season and the season before that. I think she's the only person who has been on all 3 seasons, which is just very exciting. But we'll bring her out a little later. I'm very excited because it's Brain Awareness Week, and she is none other than Dr. Brain on the show, if you've ever seen it. So very, very exciting. Also, other than that, make sure that you're following Mission Unstoppable across all social media at CBS Unstoppable so that you don't miss out on any of the really, really cool things that we have going on. If you follow us on Instagram, you can see all of the very cool women that are working in STEM and the people that get to be part of the show, and some of the people that we just have all over our digital anyways. You also can see some of the very fun STEM holidays going on. Today's Pi Day. Happy Pi Day to everyone. And again, this is Brain Awareness Week. So yeah, definitely follow us so you can stay in the know of all of those fun things. Also, if you subscribe to us on YouTube, then you'll be able to see our super, super awesome new series called Miranda Cosgrove's STEM Loft, which is truly one of our favorite series. And we're already like 7 or 8 episodes in. We're pretty far in out of all 10. So there's a lot that you can go back and watch, but there's also more to come, and I think we actually might even have the trailer in just a second. But so far we've talked about all different kinds of things. We've talked about the immortal jellyfish, which is a jellyfish that once it dies, it's able to use its cells to basically create a new jellyfish. Miranda Cosgrove tells it much better than I do in that episode. We've talked about koala fingerprints. We've talked about Ada Lovelace. We've talked about Jessica Esquivel in the quantum realm. We've talked about how mushrooms can talk to each other. There have been so many. There's been many, many more, but check out this trailer because that will tell you more.
I'm Miranda Cosgrove. Welcome to the STEM Loft. Join me each week as I tell you some of my favorite STEM facts. Ever heard of the immortal jellyfish? Or what about tree farts? Yep, you heard it right. I even share some amazing discoveries from my friend, Dr. Jessica Esquivel, and her work involving quantum realms. Go Sharks! It's gonna be so much fun. New episodes every Friday. The mushrooms are listening. Bye!
Yay, it is so much fun, like she said. So definitely make sure you check all of those out that we already have out, and then there's still more coming out on Fridays at 3 p.m. Pacific time. So just stay tuned and subscribe there so that you can see all that, and follow us across all social media at CBS Unstoppable. Also, a note before we get into everything else, we have a followers only chat here on Twitch, and if this is your first time watching, then definitely make sure to give us a follow so that you can participate in the chat with us, ask our guests some questions, and all that. And we would love to hear from you, so definitely follow us and subscribe to us as well. And also on YouTube, make sure that you... Oh, and we're live on YouTube, which is so exciting. And so make sure that you're also just checking out our YouTube channel and all of that. So we have lots happening today, and we are so excited about it. And so we're going to go ahead and get started, and we are going to do Science Newsy News.
Science Newsy News that arrests your friends and can't stop thinking about you if you wanted to.
For all of our old fans out there, this is very exciting because we have the sound back for Science Newsy News, and we haven't had it for a while, so I've just had to make it up every time. But because, like I said, it's Brain Awareness Week, our first two Newsy Newses will be brain related, so that's very exciting. So for the first one, something that I'm sure that we have all kind of heard about before, but exercise has a really big effect on our brain health. I'm sure that you've heard that it's exercise isn't just good for like your body, but it's also good for your brain. You know, you can kind of get that immediately by how it makes you feel good, but there's more studies about it, and actually, to go further into it, there was a recent study done at UC San Francisco where they actually studied the brains of elderly people and saw the results of how exercise benefited their brain health, and it honestly had very exciting results. So what they found was that when elderly people were able to stay active, their brains had more of a class of proteins that enhance the connections between neurons to maintain healthy cognition. This, of course, then was able to impact long-term health, and they found that people whose brains people who exercise more, their brains were less likely to develop Alzheimer's disease or dementia, because they're able to actually stop those toxic proteins and be able to enhance the connections so that that doesn't happen as quickly or as severely. So the really cool thing about this specific study is that it's the first one that uses human data to show the synaptic protein regulation and how it's related to physical activity and could maybe lead to positive cognitive outcomes, like I was saying.
Perfect for Dr. Brain.
I know. And also I think Dr. Brain, who will be on later, she probably has more things to add to this because she knows all about it. There was a segment kind of about it this before. It's great. But the reason that this is the first one using human data is actually because in the past it's been shown on mice and how physical activity is beneficial for brain health, but it's just more difficult to test on humans than it is on mice. But that what they're currently finding is that even exercising can help maintain the integrity of the pathways in the brain, which, like I said, can fight off dementia at the site at which it happens. So it's very important to be exercising. It's going to help your brain stay healthy, and it's going to keep your brain young longer, and we need to protect those pathways.
Oh, little rock star.
Exactly. So that's it for the first Newsy News of today. For our second Newsy News, also brain related, and also Alzheimer's related, there is new technology. This is very, very, very exciting. There's new technology that may allow Alzheimer's disease to be detected by artificial intelligence 6 years before a diagnosis would actually happen regularly, or how it is currently happening. So, using a common type of brain scan, researchers actually programmed a machine learning algorithm to diagnose early stage Alzheimer's disease, and it is about 6 years before a clinical diagnosis is made. So this gives doctors more time to intervene with treatment while it's still possible for that treatment to actually be able to do much. So obviously Alzheimer's doesn't have a cure currently, but there have been promising drugs in the past several years that are able to help slow down the progression of Alzheimer's. However, for those to work, they have to be administered really early on. And because of that, scientists were looking for ways to find how can they find this earlier than what they're currently finding it, so they can stop it earlier. So that's how this happened. So the reason it's difficult to treat by the time it's diagnosed is that usually too many neurons have died and it can't really be reversed. So in order to test for it early on, the researchers programmed images of Alzheimer's and brain scans that, like past brain scans that had images of what Alzheimer's is, into a software, and then the algorithm of that software was able to learn what was important in each of those photos of the Alzheimer's to then be able to detect it in other brain scans and find the Alzheimer's. So since it started, good news, the algorithm has since performed extremely well. It correctly identified 92% of patients who developed Alzheimer's disease in the first test set and 98% in the second test set. And the more exciting thing about that is it made these correct predictions on an average a little more than 6 years before a patient received their final diagnosis. So huge, huge, huge news for Alzheimer's research and very exciting. And so 2 huge things to take away so far are that we should all be exercising to protect our brains and prevent this from happening, because prevention might help us even more, but also catching it early on and using this research and technology by these scientists is what's really going to help long term. So really cool stuff. And then for our final newsy news story of today, this is really cool. So I'm going to need everyone in the comments to kind of say what they think is happening here, because I tried to figure it out and I don't really know, but this rock is massive. It's not just, it's a boulder. Like, it's a massive, massive boulder. It's a 250 ton boulder, and it's basically challenging gravity. So it's called the Krishnas Butterball. It's in Tamil Nadu, and it's 20 feet high and 5 meters wide. So that's not small by any means. That's massive. But if you look at how it's sitting too, it's like really just staying on one point, and it's kind of it's going downwards, like it would just roll away, but it's not rolling away. So it stands on a slippery slope of a hill of less than a 4-foot base. So this 20-foot high, 5-meter wide rock is on a 4-foot base, holding it up on a slippery terrain, and somehow it's still overcoming that force of gravity. So the position of the rock is surprising, because it seems like it's rolling down the slope, but it stands firm and okay, that's it. Yeah, that's an even better picture, because it looks like it's just going to continue rolling, but it just stays there. So not only is it just like there and like eventually it's going to move, but it stands firm, and tourists, like in the last picture you could kind of see people laying under it, but people are able to just lay under it like it's nothing. It's been unmoved by tsunamis, earthquakes, and cyclones for over 1,200 years. And it gets crazier. In 1908, the governor decided to try to remove this ball from its location because he feared that it was unsafe towards the town. And so he sent 7 elephants and tried to move the rock, but it still did not move even the slightest inch. So it's so weird. So the rock looks like a half circle as one of its parts sheared off, and no one knows the reason of that erosion at the part where it kind of turns into a half circle. But it challenges our modern technology with the question of, how is it possible that a 250-ton rock can stand on such a small base of less than 4 square feet on a hill where it's rolling backwards? Is it science? Is it magic? If anyone has ideas, please put them in the chat, because I truly have no idea. I think it's kind of crazy. I wish I knew what it was, but I truly don't. But it's really cool. I want to find out more about it. I feel like it will never move, and I hope it never does, because I think it's really cool up there. But yeah, so that wraps up this week's Science Newsy News. We have a phone button.
Science Newsy News at a restaurant friend. Can't stop thinking about it if you wanted to.
I love that. I'm very, very thrilled about it. But what I'm more thrilled about is we have one of Mission Unstoppable's favorite neuroscientists here to talk to us today. She has had the most Mission Unstoppable segments out of anyone, like I was saying at the beginning of the stream. we have Crystal Dilworth, aka Dr. Brain, here on the stream. She's a neuroscientist, she's a science communicator, she's a dancer, she's a million incredible things. She's really cool, she's good at everything, she's so smart. I wish I could be her. So yeah, she's coming on and I'm so excited. Before we bring her on, in case you missed, she had 4 segments this season, like I was saying before. But okay, we're gonna pull up her one of her segments from this season. She did multiple. She did 4. There was one on how the brain and the gut are correlated. There's one on how the brain works on when it's going through anxiety or when it's anxious. There's one all about habits in the brain, and then there's one that we're actually going to show you today, and it's all about scary movies. So it's very interesting. Honestly, you're going to want to watch all of them because they're so cool and so interesting, and she is the best. So yes, I definitely recommend all of them. Do we have the video? Okay, beautiful. So we will definitely be showing you her video and you guys are gonna be obsessed with her, just like I am. Okay, here it is.
Oh no, wait, don't be scared. It's me, Miranda Cosgrove. But if you were scared, congratulations. Your brain is working. Dr. Brain is up next with how our brains react to scary movies. Take a look. Hello, I'm Dr. Brain.
Horror movies can make us shiver, shut our eyes, scream, or just get the plain heebie-jeebies. They can make our heart race, our hair stand on end, and cause us to sweat when we're not even warm.
I've got the heebie-jeebies.
Mentally, they can create anxiety, fear, and thoughts of disgust. But where does that fear come from? You guessed it, our brains. Ta-da! Fear involves many different brain regions. One of these brain networks causes vigilance activation, which increases focus and alertness. This, in turn, activates another brain network for action, fight or flight. These reactions are built-in responses meant to protect us from real-world threats. But unfortunately, they sometimes get applied to things that aren't real. In fact, our imagination is so good that just imagining what could or might happen can trigger fear and anxiety, even if what you're imagining is totally irrational.
A vampire could come through that screen. A werewolf could come through that window. An alien could come out of this couch.
My imagination is running wild.
It's almost like I'm feeling the feelings that the character is feeling.
What kind of tricks do filmmakers use to make our brains so scared? The dark. Humans' primary sense is vision, so we get scared when we can't see what's going on and our imaginations start to run wild. Sound. Capitalizing on that whole you don't know what's going on thing, a weird sound coming from an unknown source makes us imagine all sorts of possibilities. What does that sound? Is it a tree branch tapping my window? Or something more sinister? A dangerous situation. The character is in some sort of physical danger.
Maybe they're hanging off the edge of a building just as the villain is catching up to them.
Keeping the audience in the dark, literally, and only giving them bits of information at a time activates, you guessed it, vigilance. All of these film tricks add up to create what neuroscientists call the induction of heightened arousal, but we just call suspense. Suspense and the resolution of suspense are two important components of horror and our response to a horror film. Suspense is a tension created prior to the elimination of the threat. So you're sitting there in a state of hypervigilance, ready to go into fight or flight mode if anything goes down in this movie that you don't want any part of, and boom! Classic jump scare. Startle occurs when we suddenly hear an unexpected sound or see an unexpected threat in close proximity. We scream when we're scared, and we get scared when we hear a scream. Studies show that screams activate the amygdala and other fear and fight or flight machinery in the brain. Screams also serve a social function. It focuses the attention of others on the threat through a loud, audible noise, and maybe they'll come and help you. You might be wondering, this sounds awful. Why do we like being scared? Honestly, we just like feeling things. Some audience members choose to lean into the fear, while other white knucklers actively try to tamp down their emotions while watching scary movies. We feel euphoria when we survive or avoid presented danger, and that can be exhilarating to us. The relief we feel comes from endorphins in our brains, and this might be responsible for the adrenaline rush people report after watching a scary movie. To make a long story short, if you're scared during a scary movie, congratulations, your brain is working. And remember, never go into the basement first. Your brain will thank you. Bye.
Okay, I'm back. I love that segment so much. Such a good one. But let's go ahead and bring on Crystal so we can hear all about the cool neuroscience things that she does. Hello!
Hello, thank you for having me. What fun.
Oh my gosh, of course. We love having you. So much fun. I'm so glad you're here. How's it going?
Oh, it's going really well. I love looking at that segment. Oh my gosh, it's so fun to film.
I know. Oh my gosh. We filmed what, like 4 different ones in that day? It was a long day.
Yeah, 4. But this kind of made things more crazy than they normally would.
No, but it was so much fun. Those are some of the best segments, and honestly, it's so funny. Like, me and then everyone else who's there is just like, oh my gosh, I just want to like sit here and listen to everything. Like, all of the crew's like, wait, I'm actually like learning a lot right now. This is so much fun. So I love those segments. They're some of my favorites.
I love them too, but you know, I only really write the science part of that. It's you guys and the rest of the production team that makes me funny. I'm not normally funny, so.
No, not true. You write those things down. I've seen them. I've seen the scripts. So much fun. Thank you for being here. I'm so glad you're here. So just to kind of kick things off for people who maybe haven't seen you on some of our past streams or don't know much. So you're a neuroscientist, you're a science communicator. How exactly did you get into neuroscience?
I just, thought people were kind of weird. I kind of had a hard time figuring them out. I wanted to know what made them tick and why they did the things that they did, because it didn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. And then, I kind of figured out, well, brains are a big part of who we are and why we... I should probably study brains. That's kind of how I got into neuroscience.
That's so cool. And so, obviously, neuroscience, very broad field. There's a lot in it. So what was your specific area of study?
So I came to behavior from a chemical perspective. So there's 2 different ways that the cells in our brain share information. One of them is electrical and the other one is chemical. So I chose to study the chemical language of behavior. So certain cells can talk to other cells because they speak the same language, they exchange the same types of chemicals, and those chemicals are sort of linked to different types of mood and behavior. So if we're looking at a conversation, I guess a cellular conversation using serotonin, we're probably looking at things that they're probably talking about mood or sleep or possibly hunger. And if we're looking at a chemical conversation that has to do with, let's say, dopamine, then maybe we're talking about wiring in a memory or learning that something is or is not good for us. And so I love that we use different molecules in the brain to kind of control different information pathways. And that's what a molecular neuroscientist, which I am, cares a lot about.
Gotcha. So you're a molecular neuroscientist. So what are some of the other types of neuroscience that people can study or get degrees in?
So a really big field that's exploding right now is computational neuroscience. So that's training computers to function like the brain. So using what we know about our brains and trying to recreate that type of system in a computer to kind of test our theory about whether or not our brains really work that way. And so a lot of things that you might hear about, like the use of neural networks in artificial intelligence, is us trying to train computers to think like us. So that's really big right now. There's other things, like you could actually study the electric languages of the brain. So that's looking at actual recordings of variations in electrical charges, either throughout the whole brain or in certain brain regions. And that tells us a lot about activation of that region, function of that region, how that particular brain region is communicating with the brain as a whole. So a lot of sleep studies, for instance, where they're looking at what type of sleep you're in at a given time, is looking at brain waves, which is really electrical current variations in the brain that happen, that give us a lot of information about, are you in deep sleep? Did you just fall asleep? Are you dreaming? So there's lots of different ways that you can get at study. I mean, those are just some of the big groups, but there's lots of, you know, little communities that are studying different aspects of brain function as well.
That's so cool. I always think, like, if I could study any STEM career, I feel like neuroscience would be the one that would, like, just grab my attention the most and that I would be most into. I feel like, it's just so cool. Every time I'm learning anything about it, I'm like, this is the most interesting thing I've ever learned. And it helps you just understand yourself and other people around you so much better. And it's just so cool.
That's what I love about it. I mean, everybody, you know, says space is the final frontier, but I don't think so. I think we are the final frontier. Like, granular understanding of what makes us us is far more interesting to me.
Yeah. And it's just as intense as space. It's just condensed into individual people instead of over large
It's all about
space.
scale.
Exactly. That is so cool. Okay, so then also you got into this world of science communication. So what exactly do you do as a science communicator? Things like this, I'm sure, but...
Things like this, yeah. I mean, you can see some of my work as Dr. Brain on Mission Unstoppable. So it's helping to communicate scientific topics and scientific knowledge to people that don't share a specialist background. Not everyone should have to get a degree in science in order to understand science and to use scientific concepts in their daily life. And so, you know, I went to school, I got my PhD, so I'm going to help break it down for you or for a company that might have a product that they need to communicate about in a different way that's not just technical vocabulary. Or in some cases, it's, you know, helping to explain something that has like great social impact. So I studied smoking in my PhD. There's huge public health implications for findings in tobacco research. So knowing how to communicate what you found in the lab to a population and tell them this is how it's going to affect you is really important. And that's what science communicators do.
That's extremely important because it's like, you know, if you go through and you try to read a scientific article, if you're not trained in that field or with that language, you might not be able to fully comprehend and understand what's happening. But thanks to science communicators, you're able to at least understand it, and you're able to spread that awareness to the public who doesn't necessarily know things in that same level. And this allows them to, which it's huge. It's so important. You're doing very, very,
we're like
very
translators.
Yeah. That's so cool. So how did you find out about science communication?
It just kind of accidentally happened. You know, like I was needing to communicate the importance of the research I was doing on the class of proteins in the brain that bind nicotine and lead to nicotine dependence. And people kind of noticed that I, you know, could talk about these things pretty easily. And then they started asking me to communicate other aspects of science that weren't exactly my area of expertise and helping to interpret that. And then I gave a TEDx talk about the stereotypical way that the media portrays scientists. Like, look, I see a lot, you know, like I see a lot of scientists on TV, but they don't look anything like the scientists that I know. Let's fix that. And because I was going to graduate school in LA and the talk kind of got a lot of attention and got a lot of views, I had producers hunt me down and say like, hey, what are you doing after grad school? Because you seem to have some some opinions about women scientists in the media. So how would you like to be one and help to challenge that stereotype that you seem to dislike so much? And I knew I wasn't going to be a professor. Before I even started graduate school, I knew professor wasn't my goal in life. And so I thought, I had thought about that, but it seems interesting. So let's give it a try. And then, it's like 10 years later and I'm still trying. So
and that is your career. That's awesome. And what a fun career where I feel like you're never really doing the exact same thing. Like you're always having to learn new things, always having to do new things. I feel like it wouldn't ever get boring.
It's definitely not boring. And, I got into science because I thought people were cool and weird. And I get to talk to cool and weird people and find out about their science and what makes them tick and why they like science and why they care about the type of science that they do. So I feel like I've just kind of stayed in that trying to understand people thing. Yeah. It's just like a different application of that interest. So
exactly. And it allows you to take what you understand about people and understand how can I explain this to this type of person versus this type of person. It all comes back to the exact same thing. And it's so cool. So when you're doing any sort of science communication, is it mainly neuroscience related, or do you kind of do things across many fields of science?
It can be across many fields. I'm really lucky that I have a really great social network of friends who also work in science communication, but we all have our own specialty areas. So if I'm asked to do an astrophysics story and I need to kind of do a gut check about my own interpretation of the information because I'm not an astrophysicist, I will contact my friend Katie Mack, who, is like really, really famous astrophysicist and has written popular books on that topic, as well as being a professor in the subject, and say like, hey, is this a good interpretation of these data? What do you know as an insider in the field, to make sure that I really get that perspective? Or, I'm not an entomologist, but my friend Phil Torres is. So, I can text him and be like, what kind of bug is this? Or I could also text him and say, hey, we're doing a story on the way that ants, communicate with each other to build these massive macro structures. Help me understand. And he can do that too. So
that's great. I don't know if you can see, but Slurpy Burpy in the chat asks, what is your favorite part of the brain, or what is your favorite thing that the brain does?
Oh my goodness. So many things. I think my favorite part of the brain is the prefrontal cortex. Ooh. Because that is kind of like the CEO, kind of makes it all the decisions. It synthesizes the information and it like extrapolates. So it'll say, here's what you know, but based on these patterns, you know about the future. And it does a lot of those order processing. Receptor that found in a particular layer of the prefrontal. So I have a deep and abiding love in my heart for that part of the brain. But without other parts of the brain, other brain regions working together, it's never one brain region working by itself. So without the midbrain, without the hippocampus's ability to create memories, without the amygdala's ability to interpret emotional signals that are coming from other parts of the body and brain, the PFC, the prefrontal cortex, wouldn't really have anything to do. So it definitely doesn't work alone.
Gotcha. And it cut out a little bit when you were explaining what the prefrontal cortex does.
So all of those like logical decisions, making predictions about what might happen in the future, making good decisions based on facts, not on how we feel. That's kind of what the prefrontal cortex is responsible for. I think of it as like the CEO of the company that is the brain.
That's awesome. It's an important it's an important part of the brain for sure. And is that the part of the brain where everyone says that's the part that's done developing when you're 25?
Yes, so it's one of the last parts of the brain to fully develop, I guess is the right word. But what you're really waiting for is so there's these long axons, which are like freeways in the brain that carry information very quickly. And you can think of them as freeways of information. You can also think of them the way that you would think of electrical wires. So you know that when you look at an electrical wire, you don't usually see the metal, right? You see the plastic insulation that's wrapped around it. Not only does that protect the wire itself, but it insulates it so that the information, the electrons, can move more quickly along that electrical wire. And there are a certain set of cells in the brain called myelin, and those cells wrap around the neurons to insulate those axons and help the information go faster. And that is the last stage of brain development. So when we say brain is waiting for the last of that myelination to occur in all of those connections. And once that happens, then you have the full orchestra of all of those brain regions working together optimally, because information is going as fast as it can between all of them.
Gotcha. That makes okay. That honestly is a very good picture to paint, and it makes a lot of sense. I'm now picturing a little freeway in my mind also.
Yeah, just a little information freeway. Yeah.
That is so funny. So your video is kind of breaking up just a little bit. Would you mind refreshing your page and coming back just so that we can have a stronger connection for the rest of the stream? Awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
I will do that.
Yay.
Yep.
Yay. We have Seamus the driving dog here to entertain us. He's my favorite. Yay! Did you see our driving dog?
Yeah.
That is our technical difficulties dog.
Oh, I thought he was driving the information highway.
Exactly. That's exactly what he was doing. He went straight to the highway, and he is exactly there. He is. That's probably what the pathways in my brain look like.
Yeah, exactly like that. Yeah.
Spot on. Yeah. I love it. It is my favorite thing. But okay, so a little bit ago we were talking about how obviously with being a science communicator you have a wide network of other scientists that you communicate with, which we obviously got to see recently because you and all of the IFTHN ambassadors have your statues at the Smithsonian. What was that like, getting to experience that, see it, have your statue in the Smithsonian nonetheless?
I don't know if it's really sunk in. I definitely didn't have statue of self at the Smithsonian on like my life bingo card, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
But it's absolutely incredible, just that visibility, and to have been able to be there opening weekend with most of the other 125 ambassadors and to stand next to our orange twins and answer questions that to see the public coming and to get their first impressions of the statues and hear what it meant to them to see it and to be able to answer questions in our own field. I mean, this was like a once in a lifetime opportunity, especially from during the pandemic. We haven't been doing a lot of, public outreach. It's been very difficult to connect with the people who are consuming the content that we create as science communicators. Right. And so to have had that moment and to remember, okay, the work they do is actually really important and it's really making an impact on real people. I think it's just like a really good to have.
That is honestly the coolest thing. I wish I could go see them at the Smithsonian. I did see them when they were in Texas, so I'm lucky about that. But it's so cool. So it's a bunch of bright orange statues, like you said, and it's each of the different ambassadors has a statue. And then the point of it is so that, like, because there aren't many women statues in the world, right? And so IFTHN was like, well, here are some incredible female scientists or women in STEM all around the board. We're going to make the most women statues. Is that what it kind of was?
It's the largest collection of women statues ever created.
That is wild.
I mean, that's, we see, and we just take for granted, right? We see statues of men all the time. But we often don't see statues of women, or we don't see statues of women that were real. So like maybe it's like a fountain with like a Greek goddess frolicking in the bird bath, but we don't see examples of women who have really achieved a lot for humanity or for women themselves, you know, women's rights, etc. And so this is kind of both. Like this is examples of many women that have made great strides in representation of women in fields that are traditionally thought to be male dominated, but also women who have made incredible personal contributions to the advancement of those fields. And so it's just incredible to have anyone recognize us for the work that we do, much less on this scale.
Definitely. That is so cool. And so you got to be there, you got to experience it, and you got to talk to other people who got to see you next to the statue. That is so cool. Like, could you imagine being a 5-year-old at the Smithsonian, seeing a statue and being like, oh wait, the person who this statue is of is standing right next to her statue right now. That is so cool.
And I think it tells 5-year-olds that they also could have a statue.
Exactly.
Like
I'm sure you never thought you were going to have a statue.
No, this was never anything that I spent time thinking about. Yeah.
It's so important. That is, honestly, I just think that those statues, coolest thing. I think it is just so special that they're in the Smithsonian. It's where they belong. But, you know.
I'm just happy that, so originally all the statues were in the garden, and they're moving some of the statues to individual museums. And my statue is going to the Air and Space Museum, which is obviously the best museum because it's the one where the gift shop sells astronaut ice cream, like freeze-dried ice cream.
I was going to say the exact same thing. I was going to say the exact same thing.
The best museum.
It is. You have the best one.
That's where mine is going. Yeah. So.
I honestly think that, I mean, what an honor.
Sure, yes, I know.
Now you just have to go visit it and get the astronaut ice cream every time. What's your favorite flavor?
Oh, I always get the Neapolitan.
Of course. That is the best one.
Yeah, and I eat the chocolate first. The chocolate side first.
Do you?
Yeah, always.
Okay, interesting. My favorite is the strawberry side of it. So I always go straight for the strawberry. But honestly, I sometimes save it for the last of it. So then sometimes I start with the chocolate, get the chocolate out of the way. That one's honestly maybe my least favorite. I really like the vanilla. And then
so I do chocolate by itself. And then I like the vanilla strawberry layers together, like as a strawberries and cream. I mean, like there's always a system with me. I have a system for everything.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to try that next time. I'm going to actually fly to the Air and Space Museum right now. Check out your statue, and then get some astronaut ice cream on my way out through the gift shop.
Great plan.
And that's that. I went on a field trip to the Air and Space Museum in 8th grade. Well, we went to all the museums. But I went there, and my parents actually were angry because the only thing I bought from the gift shop was astronaut ice cream. I didn't get anything like worth it. And so like when I came back home from the field trip, I think I did too. But they were like, "That's all you got? You didn't get anything you could keep long term?" And I was like, "No, but like I'm keeping the taste of the astronaut ice cream in my mind forever."
Clearly, you still have the memory as an adult. You made the right choice.
Exactly. I think I did. You're right. See?
Okay, so I can science that statement. So the dopamine hit from the ice cream that you bought was so large that it wired that memory into your hippocampus so well that it made it to long-term memory, and you can now access it whenever you want.
That is the science behind me getting astronaut ice cream at the Air and Space Museum. That's the science behind it. On my 8th grade field trip. I'm going to tell them. I'm going to tell them that they actually were wrong. I had a scientific experience that day.
You did.
And I'll remember it forever. Okay, so obviously, like I've said it multiple times now during the stream, you are the most recurring guest on Mission Unstoppable. You've been in season 1, 2, and 3. You've done it. You've really done it. So this season, you had 4 different segments. You did the gut, habits, anxiety, and then scary movies. So I want to hear more about all of those because we got to hear the condensed version, and I know that it was condensed because the scripts were longer, and then we had to keep cutting things out and keep cutting things out, still try to make it scientifically correct, and then we finally got to where it was. But so let's start with scary movies. So what exactly is happening in our minds when we hear when we're watching a scary movie, and what causes us to experience that fear and suspense and adrenaline and all that?
Well, I mean, I think it's a great combination of the survival function of the brain and also the sort of like extended consciousness function of the brain. So it's an activation of all of those stay alive pathways. So when the heart rate is increasing and our, the tension in our bodies is increasing, our brain is preparing us to run if something dangerous really does start to happen, right? Because we're getting all these cues from the movie in which we focused our attention into that something dangerous is about to happen. But the reason that it's happening to us, I think there's like one line in that segment you just showed of, it's almost as if I'm experiencing the emotions. That is right. And it's true. Like, we're starting to empathize with the characters. We are focused our attention so much into what's happening on the screen that we have created an empathetic bond with those characters. We're now feeling physiologically what we think those characters should be feeling. And that moves us from survival into like higher order consciousness, because one thing that humans have that other animals we don't think that other animals have is the ability to create a story about a probable future. So when I said that the prefrontal cortex can extrapolate and make a best guess at what might happen in the future, that's part of the imagination function, right? So we start to think, what's the worst that could happen? Somebody could jump out, and with a knife. There could be something hiding behind that corner, and we start to imagine possible outcomes that could be dangerous, so that we can feed that information back to the survival mechanisms and say, be ready, because these things could happen. And so it's like a great example of like all of the different parts of the brain working together to try and keep us alive when we're sitting in our living room eating popcorn.
Right. So ultimately it's all just trying to keep us safe, keep us alert, and keep us alive, but it's what also causes us to feel so many different things while watching a scary movie.
Right. And then we get addicted to the endorphin rush, to the, the brain is releasing amphetamine into our bodies. Adrenaline is an amphetamine, right? To stimulate our system so that we can run, fight, or flee. And with adrenaline comes endorphins, because when you have adrenaline in your body, you exert yourself so much. If you were really running as fast as you possibly could, you would be experiencing pain. We're trying to make that a little bit easier. So we're releasing endorphins to kind of help to increase the capacity of the body, again, to keep you alive. But it feels good. We like that. We like being alive.
Exactly. It helps us remember we're alive too. Are you personally a fan of scary movies?
No. As a child, I had to be taken out of a Care Bears movie because I was scared.
I got too scared?
When they turned. Well, the Care Bears movie wasn't even the issue. It was the fact that I was in a dark theater and I screamed my head off and my mom had to take me out. And then later I was afraid of the Count on Sesame Street, and whenever the Count would come on, I would leave the room. And so I tend to avoid scary movies even as an adult.
Yeah. I'm personally not a fan either. I try to avoid them. I don't enjoy voluntarily watching things that will just make me not feel great.
Yeah, the real world is scary enough for me.
Exactly. I don't need more.
No.
That's really cool, though. It's very interesting to know that sort of science behind it and understand that these filmmakers actually kind of know what they're doing, and they're tapping into the neurological, like what's going to happen neurologically to the audience while watching the movies. I think that's really cool. And so then these filmmakers actually have to be very scientifically smart, and that's why they need science communicators like you who can make them aware of what these things are, and then they can incorporate that into their movies.
Yeah, and it's only going to get better/worse with virtual and augmented reality You know,
That,
once we're getting other physiological cues, like right now they can only really use sound, right? Sound effects and soundtracks. But the next, when, you know, the temperature in the theater is lowering, when they're going deeper into the forest, or, you know, there's other sensory information that we're being given as part of the artistic creation to really recreate that feeling of fight or flight, you know, then we'll have a really scary movie.
That sounds awful. That doesn't sound fun.
It's already being used in a positive context, right? I don't know, like most people that aren't California natives wouldn't have the opportunity to come to Disneyland, but there's a really good example of that called Soaring Over California.
Right. That's right.
And they use scent, and they use direction of wind, and they use the fact that you're sort of immersed in the screen wraps around you a little bit to create a whole experience for you that is more than just sitting in a movie theater.
That's true.
The sense of the oranges, the sense of the ocean, the direction and speed of the wind, it's all calculated, right? So
see, I like it when it's for those things, but when it's for trying to make me scared, not into it.
No. Yeah, well.
Not my favorite, but I mean, I would go on Soaring Over California all day, but I mean, that is the best ride by far. It's
the line
orange
is always
smell.
so long, though.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, so then you also did a segment about the brain and the gut. So we always hear about how, like, you know, it's important to keep your gut healthy and all that, to keep your brain healthy. But what exactly does that mean?
I think, first of all, we have to get over the idea that all bacteria are bad, because they are not. And without bacteria and germs, what we would call germs, we would not be able to function. We would not exist, because there are millions of bacteriums living on our skin, inside of us right now, that are helping us to do physiological functions that we need help doing. So the example of the gut is the one that's always used, because we need bacteria in the gut to help break down food products so that we can, one, access nutrition that's in the food, you know, and two, process it and remove the waste. They help us like chew up and metabolize, you know, the food that we eat. And people that have irritable bowel syndrome, or, you know, some other diseases that come from either too much or too little, bacteria in the gut know what happens when that population is not kept happy. And it turns out that bacteria in our bodies create more than 50% of the neurotransmitter serotonin. So it's not all made in the cells in our brains. It's made in the bacteriums that live in our gut and in other parts of the body. So they're actually communicating directly in the language that the brain understands with the brain, and working together synergistically to regulate basic physiological processes like digestion that we take for granted.
That's so interesting. It's wild to think that, like, so much of what happens in the brain can really depend on what's happening in the gut and all of that too. But that also makes sense why some people say after they eat certain things, or like if they have a stomach bug, they're like, oh, well, like, I feel super, like, my brain feels foggy and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also, when your immune system is activated, because you have a pathogen, a bad bacteria, a type of bacteria where if you have too much, you get sick, that can also impact the brain, because the immune reaction isn't just in your body, not just from the neck down, right? It happens in your brain as well. So basic infections in the body can actually have a huge negative on the brain. So it's both positive and negative, that there is that give and take.
That's kind of scary.
It is very scary, but I think, you know, that's why certain studies on COVID recently have shown even mild cases of COVID, which is a virus that does activate the immune system, can cause inflammation and brain damage. So nothing is, you know, the organs in the body aren't isolated from each other. It's all one holistic system.
Right.
So you have to be very careful.
Are there certain kinds of foods or things that may promote healthy gut and brain?
Yes, and also no.
Okay.
So processed foods that are like very easy to digest and contain a lot of simple sugars. So white bread, crackers, anything that comes in a package like a candy bar, that can promote excessive bacterial growth in the gut that then will have a negative impact on brain function. I mean, it promotes many other things. I'm just talking about the effect on the bacteria, not the full. I'm not going to get into full body metabolism because that's a whole other issue, right? And things that take longer to digest that we are traditionally told are good for us, like leafy greens, like our kale and our spinach, those take longer to digest. They need certain types of bacteria to digest them, and so they can promote healthy bacterial growth in people that have normal microbiomes. Now, some people can't eat these things. They're told they should not eat kale or broccoli or things that take long to digest because their bodies proliferate bacteria very quickly. And because it takes a long time to digest, those things are growing and eating and helping to digest actually can cause disease. The really important thing as you're getting older to kind of through trial and error understand. For me, the best thing I can do is eat some salmon and some broccoli and some leafy greens. That makes my brain feel great. If I eat that for dinner, I wake up the next morning, I've had good sleep, and I'm ready to go to take a test or to be on camera or to do something like that. But that took, years of trial and error through gymnastics and dance and other things where I needed to perform in order to realize like what really worked for me. But packaged food's probably not gonna be the answer.
That makes sense.
Scientifically, probably not gonna be an answer.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, and so then you also talked about the brain and like how it's functioning when there's anxiety and all that. What are some of the things that happen to the brain while it's experiencing anxiety?
I think this was such a hard episode to put out now because, we're talking about what we know about the brain and how it processes anxiety from like a pre-pandemic perspective. We haven't seen a lot of studies come out on how living 3 years of pandemic has impacted anxiety and what baseline is for brains of people that are living through the current state of the world. I feel like I want to say like on record, it's like very difficult to tell an audience of school kids, don't be anxious because there's so many things to be anxious about. But there's a certain amount of influence that we can have over the emotional parts of the brain that hopefully we're able to work with our own neuroanatomy so that we can function, because even though all these horrible things are happening, we still have to go to school. We still have to go to work. We still have to be kind and nice and tolerant to our fellow humans. And so I think when we're talking about anxiety, we're talking about emotional activation. We're talking about those aspects of the fight or flight, of the let's keep you safe, of let's keep you alive, like ancient processes that evolved in our brain that are turned on because they perceive that we're in danger. And it's the role of the prefrontal cortex to say, yes, I hear you. Horrible. And I get why, but your life is not threatened right now. So it's kind of that like moderating influence of what's the worst that can happen? And are you in immediate acute physical danger right now? No? Okay, let's breathe and let's bring the heart rate back. Like it's that communication between the prefrontal cortex, which we talked about earlier, is one of my favorite brain regions because it can kind of be that like voice of reason, and the very real activation of the I got to keep myself alive and safe, brain circuits, how they can talk to each other And sometimes one gets the best of the other one. I mean, when you're suppressing emotions and not identifying that you have any, because the prefrontal cortex is like taking control and saying like, no, emotion is weakness, we don't do this, that's not healthy. And when your amygdala and the parts of the midbrain that are processing emotion and activating fight or flight get too loud, and they're saying, you're in immediate danger right now, but you're sitting on the couch watching a movie, or you're just alone in your room and you have a sudden anxiety attack, which has happened to me, that is also not healthy. And so we have to work with what we know about the brain to get those two systems to talk to each other and to inform each other, but not take control. That we don't want either one of those brain systems to be entirely in control. We want to be holistic, happy, full, well-rounded human beings. That's the job. That's your entire life's work right there.
So how could someone kind of work on balancing those things? Or like if they're experiencing anxiety, how can they balance that out with being also maybe more like, oh, but also this is what could go right, or oh, this, but it's not as bad as it's seeming in my brain right now?
So my two favorite things, one is to get a hold of the physical symptoms. So deep breaths, focus your attention, focus on your heart rate, try and get your heart rate down, focus on your breathing in and out, because the slower you breathe, you're calming that fight or flight, you're calming that sympathetic nervous system response. And so you can focus on the physiological symptoms of anxiety. And then my other favorite exercise is the what's the worst that could happen exercise. Right. So, like, I'm afraid that these people hate me. Great. So what? What's the worst that could happen if they hate me? Well, I won't get included in any of the meetings because they don't want me there. Okay. So what? Well, if I don't go, then I might get fired. Okay. So what? Well, if I get fired, I might not be able to, for staying the what? Well, I'll get another job. Is that the worst that could happen? That you have to get another job? You're perfectly capable of doing that. Okay, sure. So the worst thing that can happen is I have to apply for another job, and that would be a huge hassle. Now, when I'm having an anxiety attack, I can go all the way down to I won't be able to feed myself. I'll have to live in a cardboard box under a freeway overpass, and then I will die alone, eaten by a tiger in the forest, which hopefully my prefrontal cortex at some point is going, you don't live near a forest, there's no tigers, you have friends that love you and care about you, and you're not going to be alone. It'll never get to the cardboard box. So you have to work with your prefrontal cortex and your amygdala to find that point where your thinking actually falls off a logical cliff.
Yes, totally. Oh my gosh. No, that's so true. And it's one of those things where you're just going from worst case scenario to worst case scenario to worst case scenario. But at a certain point, you kind of have to look at it and be like, yeah, but it's all going to work out. It's okay. I'll figure it out.
Yeah. But you can also ask, do I have any data to indicate that any of the people actually hate me, or just take longer than I wanted them to read? Okay, we have no data. Great. They probably don't hate us in the first place.
Exactly. That's true. And I feel like that's something that so many people unfortunately deal with so much, but it's rough, but that's kind of just how our minds will sometimes work, unfortunately.
I think that social situations can cause a lot of anxiety and angst because our brains were actually evolved to scan social situations for danger. I mean, we are very smart, but we're not apex predators and like a shark or a tiger, right? So if we're attacked, we need our friends and the support of our community in order to help keep us alive. So staying in the in-group is really important. And so anxious brains will overscan for evidence that they're out of the group, meaning that they are in danger of potentially being eaten by that tiger or dying alone.
That's very, very interesting.
Mm.
Ooh, okay. My mind is kind of blown right now, but that makes a lot of sense because they're looking for that safety within that group in order to feel like, okay, I am safe in this group, I am okay here, and all that. But the second there's one thing that might even just feel slightly off, they're like, oh, so that's me, I did that, that is my fault, and they hate me, and I will never have friends again.
And then I'm down.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Really from one to the next. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And so, okay, so that was the anxiety segment. And then you also had a segment on habits. That one was really cool. Very interesting. So what exactly, like, what makes habits so easy, or what makes some habits so easy to stick in our minds, and what makes them so hard to stick for us?
Look, our brains love a shortcut. Like, they're really good at complex thinking, but in order to think quickly, they take shortcuts. So it's like, I don't know if this is a good analogy, but it's what came to mind. It's like in the movie when you see the person that almost gets caught doing the bad thing, and they're running from the cops and they're chasing them through the crowd, through the crowded subway station or the crowded museum or the crowded whatever. Why are they taking off their hat, changing their hair, changing their jacket? It's because they know that the people that are chasing them are using a mental shortcut to track throughout. Looking for the red shirt, looking for just them, who they are as a person. So brains are constantly using these kinds of shortcuts. And so if we create a habit that makes a successful shortcut, it's going to keep it. But if we make a habit that actually requires more brain activities to sustain, it's never actually going to make it to a habit.
It never would?
No, because you need the dopamine release in order to wire that into a memory. And there has to be some benefit to the brain in order for dopamine to be released. So if it's a complicated series of events, but it does lead to a desired outcome, it will take longer, but that complicated series will get wired in. But if it's never successful, there's no reason to keep that series of events.
That makes sense. Okay, gotcha. So for example, though, why is it so much easier to keep maybe things that are deemed unhealthy habits versus healthy habits?
Oh goodness, because we call it makes us happy, it's dopamine, unhealthy. I mean, what's the easiest way to create dopamine? Eat sugar, get away with something that you weren't supposed to get away with, win over somebody else, you know, all of the things that we have decided are unhealthy actually create dopamine. So there are other ways that you can get a dopamine hit that you can wire your brain to appreciate. So if you want to create a habit of, let's say, going on a workout or going on a walk, one thing that brains love is social activity. So walking with a friend, calling a friend every time you're going on that walk is creating a positive association in your mind with the habit of walking, right?
Oh, I like that.
So, you know, I love coffee. This is something most people know about me. I'm addicted to coffee. And so if I wanted to create a habit to go for a walk every morning, I could say, you have to walk to the coffee shop. You can no longer make coffee at home. But if you walk to the coffee shop, you can receive that is a dopamine hit I can associate with. And so that is a pretty good way to create a habit very quickly.
Gotcha. So there just has to be some sort of reward at the end, and that's what makes it into a habit, is your brain gets used to the reward at the end.
I probably not the best energy, because we can talk about diet culture and the way that current society polices bodies, but diets in which you lose a lot of weight early on, you're more likely to stick to, because that is the reward of restricting that food. As you see the scale number go down. I'm not saying that's healthy,
Right.
but that is, often people will not continue any kind of program if they don't see results right away. And so sometimes it's about finding a different result to tie it to. Like, hey, I talked to all 12 of my favorite friends that don't live in the same city as I do in 12 days because I called one of them every time I was on a walk. So it's about finding different rewards that are actually
That's so. It's so cool. It's
you gotta be clever. You have to outsmart your brain.
exactly. It's finding a way to trick the brain into thinking that maybe what it at one point doesn't find fun is fun, and then you figure it out. It's so cool. The brain is so complicated and cool and great, and it does everything for us. We love the brain. So, with that said, let's say there's someone watching this who wants to pursue a career similar to yours. They want to become a neuroscientist, let's say. What kind of advice would you give them?
Hold on, my earbuds just did the wah wah sound, so I'm
never a good sound. I can't hear you. No. We can put Seamus the driving dog back up if you want. Oh my gosh, okay. In the meantime, while Crystal's audio gets worked out, we have this new effect with our voices where it can make me sound like a robot. And so I'm just gonna talk so that you guys can hear me sound like a robot. Let me know when you're ready, Elena. It's very exciting. I was testing it out the other day, and I think that I want to tell every single Newsy News story with my robot voice, and I want to share every STEM Besties story with this voice. I think I just want every serious thing that I talk about to be all in the robot voice.
I think Crystal's back.
Oh. Is not back.
Wait, still can't hear her.
Oh, rip. We're currently trying to work out Crystal's audio. Can't hear her. Text her. This dog is my favorite thing that's ever happened. He's doing such a good job. There's a big truck behind him and he's not even stressed. Also, I want to know what kind of car he's driving because that is a bright steering wheel and I've never seen that on a car before. I honestly could watch this video of this dog all day.
Can you hear me now?
Yay! I can hear Crystal. Crystal, can you hear me?
I can. I had
Yay.
to really convince the system that it wanted
to work. I'm sorry.
You did a great job. Okay, so we left it at, what kind of advice would you give to someone who wants to pursue a neuroscience career?
So right now, I think one of the things that you would need for a neuroscience background that wasn't true when I entered the field is probably some understanding of coding and computer science.
Oh, yeah.
Because, as I mentioned before, the field is shifting so heavily towards being able to recreate what we know about the brain in a computer system that I think would be very unusual for someone that is going to go into true neuroscience to not have some basic level of computer science or computational or a computational background. Now that said, that does not mean that you can't work in cognitive science, that you can't work in cell biology, that you can't work on brain-related systems without having some type of coding background. But if you want to be a true neuroscientist, that is the direction I think that field is going. My degree, even though I work as a molecular neuroscientist, actually says chemistry and chemical engineering on the diploma. So I did not do computer science and coding. I came truly from a what is happening on the chemical level perspective, and I was able to make contributions. But I think right now, where all the cool stuff is happening in the field of neuroscience, it's the brain and computer.
It kind of cut out a little bit at that part after you were talking about some of the cool things, like how this is some of the cool stuff happening in neuroscience.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what I mentioned before. Artificial intelligence, teaching computers to think like humans, and trying to recreate how humans think in a computer. That's really where the cool stuff is happening. I mean, and also we'll see more around brain-computer interfaces, actually trying to wire our brains to a computer and have them understand each other. That's something that's happening right now. I mean, you look right now in terms of how we are trying to help paraplegic patients or patients that have ALS who, can't move their bodies, their brains are still active. How do they communicate? And, we're hoping that through an interface with a computer, we can facilitate communication with people whose brains are absolutely active but might not be able to communicate in the traditional sense right now.
Right. That's very cool. It's one of those things where it's almost like it feels so futuristic that we're at a point in technology and science where that's where everything's heading, and that's where we're already at, but that's the future of it. So I actually really like that advice. Maybe get into coding, take a coding class if this is something you're interested in, because it can only help you. It won't hurt you to know those kinds of things.
Absolutely.
And okay, so before we go, where can people follow along with you and your journey and what you do, and stay in touch with your journey?
Probably Instagram is the best place to find me. I'm Polly Crystal HD because there are many me's. I'm a multifaceted person. I'm a dancer and a scientist and a communicator and many things. So Poly.
I've always wondered why it was that, and that makes sense. That's very clever.
Think of it like a polymer is a chain of many different molecules, right? So I'm a polycrystal.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's nerdy, but it works.
No, that's great. I love it. Okay, well, amazing. So everyone, make sure you follow Crystal at polycrystal. Make sure you check her out on Mission Ensemble. She's Dr. Brain. And there are lots and lots of segments because, again, she has been on all 3 seasons. So super, super cool. Crystal, thank you so much for coming on. This was so much fun. We love having you. Please come back all the time. It might still be frozen, but...
Oh, no, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Yay. Yay. I am so glad that you were able to come back. We will talk soon. And and have a
Okay,
great rest of
sounds
your
good.
night. Amazing. All right, thank you. She is just so good. I feel like every time I talk to her, I learn a million new things, and they always stick with me. Every time people ask me some of the cool things that I've learned from working on this show, I always come back to Dr. Brain Facts because there are just so many. It's so much fun. She's the best. I'm so glad that she was able to come on and help celebrate Brain Awareness Week with us. And yeah, so if you guys have ever have missed any of her segments, they're on our YouTube channel, so definitely check those out. She has some really cool TikToks that she's done with us, like for Halloween she did some cool ones. She has lots of really cool stuff, so check out our TikTok as well. You might have to scroll a little bit, but you'll be able to see some of her really fun TikToks that she's made with us. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. Make sure that you subscribe and follow us here. We have more shows this week. We have one on Wednesday, and then we have STEM Besties on Wednesday with Stephanie Castillo, and then on Thursday we have, I'm so excited about this, we have build or make your own DIY optical illusions, and Julia Ravey, who is also a neuroscientist, is going to be here to explain the what's going on in our what's going on in our brains when we're seeing optical illusions. So I'm so excited. She'll be here to talk more about that with us. And yeah, and then also make sure that you follow us on all social media at CBS Unstoppable. Thank you to everyone who is watching on YouTube today. And everyone, also make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube and check out all of our Miranda Stemloff series, where she is just telling really cool science facts. And again, I've said it before and I will say it again, I promise you will learn something new from it every single time you watch one. We will see you again soon. We'll see you on Wednesday. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.